Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my channel if this is the first time you've arrived here. I hope you like the content. If you have a little look around, if you do like the videos, please subscribe because it does help the channel out and it'd be nice to get to know you more if you comment on the videos. So today is a special video because I'm doing something on the art of writing and its experience as a reader as far as the hook that gets you locked into the book. So how you connect to a book, when you connect to a book, why do you connect to a book, and how certain books have tried to do that, and for me personally have sometimes grabbed me straight away, sometimes they've taken a little bit longer to grab me. And it's just interesting because I noticed when I was reading my last book that I've just finished that it was very obvious that the writer chose to start the book in a particular way because it would hook you in, but that really wasn't really what hooked me in, and it took a little bit longer. So about 50 pages in I was hooked in, and I was going to refer back to my two novels. So I've written two novels. That's the last one, The Brown Yelp Gang, and Out Among the Ice Beacons is my first novel, and I was going to talk about why I began those novels like I did as well. So I'm going to talk about some books that I've read myself as a reader and then talk about it as a writer. And I'd really love it if some people that also had other channels talked about what they thought about when they get hooked into a book and what they think their experience as a reader is, as far as when it's worked, when it's not worked, when it doesn't matter if it's worked, because there is definitely an example here of how I wasn't grabbed straight away, but it paid off in the end. And that kind of thing, you know, is a slow burn something that you really enjoy because you feel like it's really rewarding? Or do you find slow burns hard work because you have to kind of push through and hope for the payoff? That kind of thing. I'd love to know what other booktubers are thinking. I'd love to know what you think as well. If you're watching this and you haven't got a booktube channel, please comment below on what you think as far as this idea of when you get hooked into a book and whether there are certain things you like to happen. So what inspired me to do this video was Chester Himes' Cotton Comes to Harlem. It's a really, really good book. So I've just put up my monthly wrap-up of September, and in that wrap-up I say how much I like this book. I thought it was really good, and I definitely want to read more of his stuff. But what I found really interesting was that it starts off with a big action scene. Something quite hectic happens at the beginning, and it's like a big set piece. But that didn't pull me into the book. It was fine. It didn't pull me out of the book, but it wasn't really until sort of 50 pages in that I was properly locked in, because that initial scene didn't have any context. So it doesn't matter because I enjoyed it and it was fine. It didn't take that long, but I imagine that Chester Himes probably wrote that scene because they probably thought it's a really nice way to start, get them hooked in straight away with a big kind of action scene. But without context, it doesn't really matter. So I think you need that extra exposition and that extra character work to get you involved anyway. So I thought that was an interesting observation that I had about that book, and it is the reason why I thought of doing this video. So Cotton Comes to Harlem was definitely an example where I think the author was trying to do something which wasn't really the way I got in. And then if I just show you this to compare that to The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Blade Itself is a book that is extremely popular and almost universally praised. I've heard a few people say they didn't like it, but there's a lot of praise for the book. And I did like it, but it took ages to get going, and it didn't hook me in, and I didn't connect to it until probably more than halfway through. I can't remember exactly when it was because it was a while ago that I read it, but I remember that it was a real slog because I wasn't connecting very quickly, and I had to read more than half of the book for me to care. But it's a strange thing because it did pay off, and by the end of it, I would criticise the book for taking too long to get the plot going, but the character work and the world building aspects of it, those bits of it that made you get immersed in different ways, not because of big action scenes and like a big plot developing. Those other ways that you can get immersed into the book, those really worked. So by the end of it, the book had sold itself to me, but it took a long time to get going, and I wasn't connected straight away. And when you're not connected, you got that sort of leap of faith, and you've got to force yourself to keep reading it because you're thinking it's going to pay off. This is kind of linked to a DNF kind of question, isn't it? Because I read this, I think it was a buddy read. It was a buddy read with Ollie from Criminology, and he DNF'd it. He was like, "Nah, this is bollocks," and I kept going, and it did pay off for me, as I said. But I think if you're not connecting, then that's when you're possibly going to DNF something, isn't it? Because life's too short. Yeah, it's interesting that this one took a long time to get going, and I think Joe Abercrombie doesn't really want to do what Chester Himes did, which is like have this big set piece at the beginning. He doesn't want to do that, and there isn't really hardly any set pieces in it. There's a lot of it's like just like most of the book is exposition and sort of wandering around and conversations and things that aren't particularly dramatic. It's not a very active book, so I think it's interesting the fact that he didn't seem to mind that, and he was quite happy to do that because it's very deliberately not like that, but it did pay off in the end for me. And then you get some examples here of books that really did grip me straight away, and I did lock in. So this is so far the only full novel I've read by Joe Hill, Heart-Shaped Box, and it starts about 10, 12 pages in. You've got this really tense scene that started the atmosphere of the book that continued on right through it, and there's this sort of tension through it, and it's like a creepiness in it, and I really enjoyed that aspect to it, and I enjoyed the tone of it, and the fact that what really kind of kicked off quite quickly in the book, like kind of kept you there, sort of like gripped you physically. So yeah, that was really cool. And this one was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow was one that gripped me because of the characterization. So because quite quickly you get the two main characters established, and once they're established, their relationship is established as quickly as they themselves are established, and that relationship is the building blocks of the book. The whole book is about that relationship between the two of them, and straight away, really quickly, that kicks in. And I think it's very clever the way that you don't have to wade through tons and tons of backstory before you start connecting, because the two characters are connecting, and what that really entails as far as they're very different people and how that relationship develops. It's very it grips you straight away, and it's very tightly written, I think, this one. And then again, this is through characterization again, but this time it's more through humor, through likability. I don't really think the characters in Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow are particularly likable, but the characters in here are definitely likable, and you're kind of willing them on, and you straight away you are immersed in their situation. But really, because it's a quite cliched situation, you're more immersed in the characters and their relationship between each other, and the two main ones especially. And there's this sort of sense that you're kind of gunning for them, and there's a very easy, pleasant experience going through these pages with them, So I think actually for me, I'm going to do a video on cozy reads, and for me this was a bit of a cozy read, even though it's quite violent. So I'm going to do a separate video on what cozy reads really mean. But anyway, that's not what I was talking about today. So this is an example of, I think, how charisma and the likability of the author's voice pulls you in, drags you in, and locks you in. So I think that's interesting, because I don't think there's any sort of particular tricks that they're doing. It's just that if you relate to the author's voice, then it gets you in there, and the characters really start selling themselves to you in this book, I think, quite quickly. And then last one, again, another fantasy one, but I was just thinking about books that gripped me straight away and kept me there, and ultimately these last few books are books I read very quickly because I couldn't wait to find out what happened next. And this is actually The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So this is another book that, again, once I started reading it, I was utterly gripped very quickly, and I really wanted to know what was going to happen next. And I loved the characters, and I loved the situation. I loved the plot as well. I thought it was really interesting what they were going to do. It was that great idea of, it was against the odds. You know, what they were suggesting was quite ambitious, and are they going to get away with it? Blah blah blah. So yeah, straight away, Sanderson knew how to kind of get you gripped into the story, get you locked into the characters. So I think that's a successful moment of getting that immersion into your head when you're reading it. The pacing of these books is really interesting because, like I said, with the first Blade, the first Lore trilogy, the first Blade, hold on, what's it called? The Blade itself, isn't it? The Blade itself. With the Blade itself, pacing was not really even anything it seemed Abercrombie was particularly worried about. It hasn't really got much of a rhythm to it, I don't think. Whereas some of these others, the rhythm kicks in quite quickly, and you've got this sort of pace that is working through the book very deliberately and keeps you wanting to read the next chapter. So I wanted to just finish off this potential discussion. I don't know if I'm going to get comments afterwards or if I'm going to get other booktubers telling me what they thought, but I was going to comment on the ideas that I had for my books. So this one, the Outmony Ice Beacons, quite quickly, this is about I'll just tell you what it's about first, so it has some meaning towards what I'm saying. There's about 3 teenage British boys that end up kind of stranded. Certainly they end up on another planet, and that planet freaks out when they discover that there's these people from another planet on their planet, and it's like it's a planet that where everybody lives underground because it's an ice planet, blah, blah, blah. But the first chapter, I deliberately wrote them in school, establishing the relationship between the 3 boys before they tried this contraption that Julian, the main character's father, was building. So I wanted to have a chapter where I established the relationship between the three boys before they went off. So that was deliberate, and I think it was the right thing to do, because I feel like once they do go onto this other planet, then, you know, hopefully the mystery of it, the strangeness of it, what I do with the language barriers and the political predicament they're in, those kind of things start kicking in. But you've got this first chapter, which is literally set in the classroom, which is a different kind of tone. It's a different setup, and it's just about the 3 of them. So, yeah, that was my decision for that book, which was my first novel. And then for my last novel, The Brown Yelp Gang, I actually wrote the first chapter about, I don't know, a third of the way into my writing of it. So I'd already written a number of chapters, and then I decided to write kind of like a prologue kind of chapter where most of the book, the Brown Yelp Gang are interacting with music promoters and gangsters and strange con men and stuff, and weapons salesmen. But the beginning, it starts with an interview with the band manager and like a TV chat show host kind of thing, and he's basically raving about the new lineup of the band and the new album that was coming out, and their tour that they were going to be going on to celebrate the album. So I wrote that chapter after I'd written some other chapters, because I wanted to have a different kind of prologue kind of chapter to set the book up. So I did that imagining that would be a nice way to establish the characters, establish the situation, and establish their fame and establish their notoriety before it starts getting a little bit hectic when they start getting involved with gangsters. So again, it's like a decision I made when I was writing it. These books I've just referred to are books that, again, these writers would have decided to kind of have that pace or that kind of structure to it, to either provide a slow burn or provide an action thing that might lead to a slow burn after this initial action set piece, or very quickly establish a pace and a tone that they want to continue through the whole book. So there are various ways that people do it. I just think it's really interesting to sort of figure out what you like, and and me thinking about what I like. And I think I like it when, like with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, or with Kings of the Wild. I think those are my two sort of, out of the ones I've mentioned, I think they're the two that I kind of locked into the most, where you've got this sort of immersion that comes from your relationship with the characters, that you immediately relate to the characters, and you can root for them, or you can be curious about them, because I didn't particularly like the characters in this book, but I was kind of curious about them. This was the book where I was more rooting for them, but the story's carried along by the characters, and straight away this interaction was happening, and there was a lot of depth to it already with what they were doing and what they were trying to move towards. So there's a sense of movement in the narrative. What do you think? Tell me what you think. Do you think you like a slow burn? Do you like something immediate? Do you like it where it's kind of a bit of both, and it's not like there's a sense of moving towards a dramatic finale, but it's not really just a slow burn? There's kind of little peaks and troughs or something like that. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know below. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.
Paint me a picture